welcome to the first Commissioner meeting of March. We will now have the flag pledge led by Commissioner Kemp.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, if anybody has their cell phones on, please silence them. Looking for an approval of the agenda.
Move the agenda.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Passes. Consent agenda. Looking for a motion on that.
Move the consent agenda.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes. Public appearances. Are there any public appearances today? Okay. Apparently not. Property services. Mandy?
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the board.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I have 3 items for your consideration from the February 24th Planning and Zoning Advisory Committee. The first item is for WW Blacktopping, the applicant and property owners Mark and Susan Kendall for the 3-year review of their mineral extraction permit to mine, crush, and stockpile gravel with the potential for placement of a hot mix plant. There were no public comments received at the meeting or prior to the meeting. And there also is no discussion of a link at this meeting, also with the Planning and Zoning Commission. Therefore, they recommended unanimous approval with the attached conditions.
Mr. Chair, I need to recuse myself from this discussion.
It's in your area. Okay.
My neighbors.
Any discussion? Any motions?
I move approval.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any more discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Passes unanimously.
The second item I have for you is for John and Solvik Langer. This is to amend their previous conditional use permit from 2018 to establish a wholesale and retail greenhouse. During the course of the matter, they found out that they're going to be required to have building code in with it, and so they went through the process to take care of their tax classification from residential to agricultural, and the next step before they started construction was to remove the condition. Therefore, staff could issue the permit. There was minimal discussion at the meeting, and there were no public comments at the meeting or prior to the meeting. Therefore, the Planning and Zoning Commission requested that they move ahead with the removal of the condition, and they recommended unanimous approval.
Just for clarity's sake, so are there technically 2 actions here, or is this all?
It's just one action for approval of the amendment of the...
Approval of the amendment of the conditional use,
yes.
right? I'd make that motion.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes.
And the last item I have for you is for Solar Club 2 LLC on property owned by Ringstorf Unterhemmen LLC. This is the site that currently has a 5-megawatt project and then also 2 1-megawatt projects. They requested to establish a 1-megawatt project up to 6.8 acres of land on the property. At this meeting, there were no public comments, nor were there any comments made prior to the meeting to staff. There was some discussion with Planning and Zoning based on the proximity of the location, but they did recommend unanimous approval with the attached conditions.
Any discussion? I have a question for you. Is there eventually going to be enough solar in that area?
At this time, the zoning ordinance does not have a density standard for any solar sites.
From Excel, that they're going to be whatever, saturated?
Right. Excel has taken the position previously that there was so much capacity left in the substations,
Okay.
and they were going to max out. They no longer are taking that position, and they're allowing solar projects to just continue to operate and then plug in as available.
Okay. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, any discussion about that?
We had no comments, written or otherwise, at this meeting, and it was in the same neighborhood as our prior.
Mm-hmm.
But it had a different view. Okay. Any other discussion? All in favor? Say aye.
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 Passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Mindy.
Who are we doing with Human Services today?
Cassie,
Cassie?
you gonna come up too?
I'll
Jody, you can come up too.
Good morning.
Hi.
Good morning, Cassie.
This morning we have Jody Fishneck here, one of our public health nurses and our public health emergency preparedness coordinator, to provide some educational information on the COVID-19.
Oh, okay.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Mr. Chair, members of the board, thank you so much for this opportunity to give you a brief update on coronavirus. By now you are well aware that COVID-19 continues to spread at a fast pace globally and has come to Minnesota in the last few days. 2 cases have now been reported in the state, one in Ramsey County and the other in Carver County. A minimal number of individuals in the South Central region have been tested for the respiratory virus, and luckily so far all have been negative. COVID-19 looks very much like our seasonal influenza, and the illnesses share many of the same traits, making them hard to distinguish from each other. Fever, cough, body aches, fatigue, and sometimes vomiting and diarrhea. Both viruses can result in pneumonia. Both can range from mild symptoms to severe illness and even death. Both viruses spread at an average rate of about 2 individuals per infected patient. One notable difference so far that's being discovered is that COVID-19 often causes difficulty breathing or shortness of breath. Because COVID-19 is novel, a new coronavirus, there are 5 that have been affecting humans. There are still many things we do not know about it, including exactly how it spreads and what the incubation period is. Talk has been ranging anywhere from 2 to 14 days. Public health officials believe that the virus is already circulating throughout the country and causing cold and flu-like symptoms. Without testing, we may think that these illnesses are our usual winter forte, the usual winter illnesses that we see. But now that the Minnesota Department of Health has started offering confirmation lab work, which they did on March 2nd, after several weeks of delays nationally in rolling out the tests, the number of COVID-19 cases will likely go up simply because the virus can now be identified. So what we do know so far is that new research suggests that 81% of COVID-19 cases are mild, with just 14% severe and 5% resulting in admission to the hospital. The fatality rate is estimated at 2.3%, which is higher than the seasonal influenza normal rate of about 0.1%. We also know that the virus is more likely to affect those older than age 70 and those with chronic medical conditions. While the newness of COVID-19 and the actions being taken to contain it worldwide are increasing in the headlines and grabbing lots of attention, it is important to keep some perspective on the situation. Despite 110,000 cases and 4,000 deaths globally from COVID-19, our seasonal influenza remains a greater public health threat based on sheer numbers alone. This year in just the United States, so just the United States, there have been 34 million cases of influenza, resulting in 20,000 deaths. At this point, you are probably wondering what Nicollet County Public Health is doing to monitor the situation with COVID-19. Many of you know that public health has well-developed emergency preparedness plans that we update and test regularly. Last week, we convened a COVID-19 work group of Public Health Emergency Preparedness, FEP, team members and County Emergency Management to be ready to implement our pandemic flu, isolation and quarantine, and essential services plans if needed. Health and Human Services also has been working diligently to update its continuity of operations plans to reallocate staff if needed and keep the agency running if a larger response is needed. This week we've provided resources to employees so they can better communicate with clients and have also posted resources on our county Facebook page for the general public. Additionally, we inventoried our stockpile of personal protective equipment, also known as PPE, things like masks, gowns, and eye shields, and we ordered additional supplies. Most notably, though, we have reached out to our community partners and will continue to do so. I am running in at the last minute because I was just at an exercise with Gustavus on COVID-19 where they planned a scenario of a student coming into the health services with COVID-19 symptoms and what would happen next? And how would we communicate what's the immediate response? What we have found in years of working in public health preparedness is we all need to work together, whether it's a public health or any other county emergency, to best meet the needs of Nicollet County residents. We have been connecting with the Mankato and St. Peter school districts, along with all the other smaller schools that we provide school nursing services to out in the county. Last week, I did a question and answer session on COVID-19 for faculty and staff at South Central College. Friday, I will meet with Rivers Edge Hospital. We have also been participating in at least 4 conference calls a week, sharing information with the Minnesota Department of Health, the Centers for Disease Control, the Minnesota Hospital Association, and our own South Central Healthcare Coalition, which is a collaborative of healthcare providers, EMS providers, emergency medical services, local public health, and emergency management. Please know that we are closely monitoring the situation. Now is not a time for alarm nor panic. I believe Governor Walz said last week, it's preparedness, not panic. Instead, this is a time to stay informed and practice all the same things we do to avoid any infectious disease and stay healthy, particularly in this season. Wash your hands frequently, cover your cough, stay home if you are sick, and avoid those who are ill. If you haven't, this is my public health nurse plug. If you haven't yet received your influenza vaccine, it's not too late, and we still have supplies in our office. Flu activity is still widespread in Minnesota, and the vaccine may prevent you from getting influenza or lessen its severity if you do get it. While the development of a vaccine for COVID-19 is expected to be a year away, influenza is one virus that you can take action with right now. Finally, information on COVID-19 is changing quickly, and the most credible and accurate information can be found on the MDH and the CDC websites. I urge you to check these frequently. Again, I appreciate the opportunity to come before you to discuss COVID-19, and I would be happy to take any questions.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Jody, thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
Are test kits to detect the virus available to our county health department?
They are not.
Why?
Currently, all testing is being done through the MDH lab, so it's just a slower rollout nationally. So they were just available, they were rolled out nationally. There were some snafus, and so then we went back to just CDC testing. And just last week, MDH started to have test kits available. They have not been offered at county level anywhere as far as I know in Minnesota. But they are expecting that commercial laboratories will start jumping on the bandwagon any day now and offering more testing.
Well, it's encouraging to hear. It's also discouraging to hear that they weren't available in the beginning. I appreciate your perspective about keeping perspective and not time for alarm or preparing, not panicking. But I fit into an age group where I become more concerned.
Sure.
And if these test kits aren't available to counties or states or hospitals, then the numbers of cases in this new novel virus can't really be
known, correct.
confirmed. And Italy is shutting down.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. America isn't shut down yet.
That's correct.
So your sharing of information is going well, are you telling us?
Community partners have been very receptive. We've had a lot of really good contacts, and that's such a key with emergency preparedness. It's the networking and it's the relationships that you develop. So that we always say in emergency preparedness, we don't want to exchange business cards during the emergency.
Okay. I yield back. I may have
Mr.
another
Chair.
question.
Yes.
Jody, you described our access and ordering PPE equipment.
Correct.
Is that readily available? Are you starting to have some issues with that, or is that kind of the
Most
everything
providers in the area and nationally are having problems getting PPE. We do have a stockpile of masks. When an event like this happens, so in the past, like Ebola or H1N1, a funding stream typically comes with it. And so we have acquired equipment in the past that we can still use. So when the new guidelines came out, we ordered some new equipment to match those guidelines. But for right now, we are okay. There's also a lot of the smaller healthcare providers in the region are having trouble accessing these. For example, when I bought surgical masks, I ultimately ended up buying them at CVS for $8 or $9 a box for 50. But at one point, the only option we could find was a box of 50 online for $85 at Amazon. So people are really taking advantage of the situation. And a lot of people, understandably, are acquiring these masks, et cetera, when they don't actually need them. They may be getting a false sense of protection from having them.
Yes, Terry.
You want to go ahead? I'll come back.
You're working really hard, so thank you.
Thank you.
And you seem to be everywhere, doing everything. I had a question about, I'm on our Facebook, the county Facebook page.
Yes.
I don't see the information that may have been. So what I was going to ask you is there a possibility of putting maybe a link or something on our county webpage?
Yes. Yes,
I
we
know
definitely
it
can.
census information right now, which is also important, but
Yes. Well, I'll check on that after the meeting.
that would be great.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Question I have is, they don't really know, like, say Terry could have it and not know it, and then
Correct.
you give it to me? just
Some
sitting
people
here?
are appearing to be asymptomatic.
Okay.
Yes.
And they don't, like I say, you can be perfectly healthy and you can spread it.
Yes.
Or almost perfectly healthy.
That said, there's not a cure for it. There's not necessarily treatment. If you had seasonal influenza, we may give you Tamiflu, an antiviral medication, but that hasn't been approved yet for coronavirus. So really, at this point, and to Jack's question too, if you were diagnosed with it, the care at this point would be supportive. We would try to manage your symptoms. An antibiotic is not going to work because it's a virus. And we would do our best to keep your temperature down, keep you isolated, and make sure that you don't become dehydrated.
You said some really, I'm just making a mental list of all the things that I'm either learning and haven't confirmed. Still can get a flu shot.
Still can get a flu shot. That's a virus that you can do something about. We can be very focused on this virus that we don't know a lot about and that there's not a vaccine available for yet. But there is one that you can still do something about, and influenza activity in Minnesota is still considered widespread. So this is something you can do about it. We have them in our office. It takes about 2 weeks to develop immunity once you get a flu shot. So if you haven't gotten one, I would really encourage it.
And wash your hands. Buying masks may not be there are a number of things you mentioned I think would be helpful if we reiterated them.
Yes, and I think with the masks, there's two different kinds of masks. There's a surgical mask, which is kind of your basic, it's basically like a Kleenex or a paper towel that's covering your mouth. When you go into the doctor and you have respiratory symptoms, that's what you're going to get. And that isn't to prevent you from getting sick, but more to contain your secretions so that other people don't get sick. But a healthcare provider would wear what we call an N95 mask that would filter out 95% of the particulates and keep you from getting sick. Now that said, you have to be fit tested for that. So you could be wearing an N95 mask, and if you are not fit tested for it, again, you would have a false sense of security about its effectiveness, because you could be wearing an N95 and it's got many benefits, but if you're leaking around the side, that virus is going to go straight in.
You know, I think, Mr. Chair, many Minnesotans have a great deal of confidence in the Minnesota Department of Health.
Yes.
Dating back to Michael Osterholm's days in that department. And he's with the University of Minnesota now. And there are so many health facilities in the state of Minnesota that we all, I think, as Minnesotans, we feel a lot more confident. But are people like Michigan State University and Boston's St. Patrick's Day Parade, all those cancellations, are they overreacting, or are they just being careful? And it puts you in a tough position to answer that, but it's a really good question.
I do think it's a really good question, and I think, You know, it changes so much every day. Like this morning, the first thing I got up was to check my numbers, and I usually read about coronavirus for about an hour before I come to work every day, just to see what are the latest developments. It's changing very quickly. So I would be hesitant to say that they're being overreactive, but I think if we're going to take action, it needs to be very measured, and it very well could be that not having all these people together is a good idea. You know, it's starting to look more and more like that is the case.
Yes, Marie.
So, Mr. Chair, that leads to the thing, if you're sick, stay home.
Exactly.
Whether you have the seasonal virus or perhaps this or the intestinal thing that's going on, stay home when you're sick. Don't spread it.
Definitely. One of the things that's coming up in our South Central Healthcare Coalition calls too is that a lot of local employers, you know, require a doctor's note after you've been gone for 3 days. And so we're asking local businesses to kind of loosen that up a little bit, because if you have coronavirus or if you have influenza, at that point we can't do anything for you. So it would be better if you did not go to the doctor. Now, that said, I don't want anybody to think that I don't want you to go in if you're sick. Definitely go in if you need that care. But just to go in just to get the note is something we might have to loosen up, some of the attendance policies for work. So that's something that the Healthcare Coalition is talking about.
Mr. Chair, and the schools are having the same conversation about
Yes.
student attendance. And members, we just got an email from the Association of Minnesota Counties about coronavirus and a webinar they're going to do on Thursday and other resources.
Yes, there's been a lot of really good webinars. People have really come forward to share information and just really develop those relationships. It's been very good. We've been in these conference calls, multiple conference calls, for weeks. I would say well over a month now.
One question I had there. You said it's like over 2% death loss?
Now,
That's of confirmed
it's
very ill people?
the fatality rate is about 2.3%. Depending on how you read it, some places are saying it's as high as 4%. But you have to keep in mind, to balance that out, is we think that the virus is widely circulating already, and to Jack's point again, those cases have not been counted. So once we actually got a better handle on how many cases there are, that rate would probably come down. So it is higher than influenza at this point. That I can say.
20 times.
Yes.
Potentially. Okay. Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Jody, are there any resources, or are you having any difficulty within our agency and within the county getting the support you need? Are things being made available to you? Is your interaction with other department heads and working on the emergency plan for if we have to telecommute and do other things that we haven't fully fleshed out yet, comfortable that that discussion is going forward well, and are we meeting your needs?
Yes, I think things are going very well. People have been very receptive to it, and I think as we keep developing, we convened this county work group last week. I think we'll be having a lot more requests and a lot more information to put out.
So then, daisy chaining that, when we have good new information, then is our intent to have that readily available via the website, via the other, and even to the point where if we have to do a direct mailing, we're prepared to do that if we need to. Is that fair and consistent with what your action plan would be?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Maybe we should ask the same question of Ryan. Is there anything you need from us?
Yeah, no, so far we have all the resources that we need. We'll be sure to include this on Facebook and our website to keep the public informed, and our staff have done a really good job with meeting with the key players, the schools and other facilities with this. I talked to our technologies department, and should we get an issue where we have to quarantine staff and people have to work from home, we have the infrastructure in place right now to have up to 85 people work from home. We could do that in short order. If we needed to, it'd just be a matter of adding additional infrastructure to do that. So we're well prepared to provide services should this escalate to that level.
Thank you.
Thank you for asking that.
Do you know the nursing homes beans and things, they're having special preparations?
It would be kind of standard for what they would do for seasonal influenza. They're also a group that we've been meeting with.
And they're part of the coalition also?
Yes. And just in the last week, the coalition has stepped up. We call them CMS providers for the Medicare acronym. And so just in the last couple of years, CMS providers like dialysis and some of the group homes, some of the smaller healthcare providers have been drawn into the healthcare coalition more because they need to come up with emergency preparedness plans now as part of their requirements for being a CMS provider. So we're connecting with them more. We also do have a healthcare coalition meeting next week, and later today we will be meeting to come up with a little bit more of a regional media response, and probably have some type of a press conference on the regional situation within the week.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Just one. If you turned on a television set and they said it was a hoax, what would you do? Turn it off or say, well, that sounds like a good idea. I think I'm going to go to work.
Well, that's a good question, Jack. I am a glass half full kind of person. So even if we spent all this effort getting ready, there are still lessons to be applied to the next disease outbreak that we have. So if coronavirus never comes to Nicollet County, that would be a great, wonderful thing. And the lessons that we've learned and the partnerships that we've worked on strengthening during this, that would never be a loss. So I hope that we're not doing this for a hoax. Well, actually, in a way, though, that would be good. But
Well, it seems to me it's not a hoax. It's
Yeah.
real, and it's here, and we need to be prepared.
yes, and I think preparedness efforts are never wasted.
Another question. I mean, I've probably heard it on the news, but the death toll in China and in Italy, and probably in Italy it's a little more reliable. Have you remembered what that is at all?
The global death toll is 110,000, right? I'm sorry, the global cases is 110,000. Sorry, that was a bad misspeak. Global death toll is 4,000.
Anybody else? Thank you very much.
Appreciate your work.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you and all your peers.
Ryan, you'd like to talk to us?
Yeah, I can introduce the next subject, and in an odd way, it's probably related to the coronavirus to some extent.
Yeah.
And our impact on our markets. Today we'll have Paul Steinman with Baker Tilly Municipal Advisors. Paul, you can come on up and take a seat there. Discuss the possibility of refunding or refinancing our general obligation bond 2013A, which is what we use to fund the Health and Human Service Building, the County Attorney's Office, and do some other improvements on the campus here. This debt was originally scheduled for a call date and possible refunding for February of 2021. But right now, because of the market conditions that we have that are in the news, it's possibly providing us with an opportunity to refund this debt now, and significant savings of dollars over the life of this debt. So I will have Paul explain that a little more in detail of how we would be possibly going ahead with that and answer any questions that the board has. So, Paul, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Croce. Good morning,
Morning.
board. So what is before you today is a refinancing or refunding of your 2013 bonds. Just for clarification, we use a term called the call date, and I just want to make sure that everybody kind of has the same baseline of information about your bonds. So in 2013A, I was here and presented bids, and you awarded bids for sale of $10,530,000 of bonds to build your Health and Human Services building. And those bonds were structured with what we refer to as a call date of February 1st, 2021. Is that like 9 months from now or 10 months from now? That is defined as the first opportunity that you would have to refinance or restructure this debt. So today we're here before that call date talking about refinancing, because we live in a country where there are entrepreneurs and capitalistic minds and folks that figure out how to do things that are undefined. So February 1st, 2021 is the first opportunity do you have to refinance these bonds, but we're here today with an opportunity to do just that. The other piece is that you may be aware that several years ago, the IRS, the federal government, eliminated tax-exempt advance refundings. That's what we're talking about today, is an advance refunding, a refunding in advance of February 1st, 2021. So the federal government eliminated that opportunity. But what we're here today showing you is a taxable advance refunding. So that is still an opportunity for entities to issue taxable bonds to refund in advance of February 1st, 2021 in this case. The tax-exempt advance refundings were eliminated, so those aren't possible. But today, believe it or not, today in this market environment, you can issue taxable bonds at rates that are better than tax-exempt rates were back in 2013 when you issued these bonds. So this is what's before you is a taxable crossover refunding. It's the sale of taxable bonds. You would sell taxable bonds. They would go into an escrow account, and on February 1st of 2021, those taxable bonds would come out and pay off your tax-exempt bonds, and then you would move forward making payments on your taxable bonds. All of this can or is estimated to result in total future value savings of about $378,000. That's savings net of all costs of issuance, and that I believe is about $55,000 a year, starting with your debt service levy this fall for pay 2022. So that's a lot of information. So the last piece, and it's a very common question here, is so your average rate on the bonds that you have outstanding today is 2.68%. And the average rate we're estimating on these taxable bonds would be 1.645%. So given that, you can see that there's interest cost savings. So the last time that this analysis was put together was on the 2nd of March. And since the 2nd of March, Monday, March 2nd, there have been again significant changes in the market, which basically in the bond market today you see the stock market going down, and those folks are putting their money into safer investments such as U.S. Treasuries and bonds. So the more people that run to put their money in bonds, the more demand there is for bonds, raises the price of bonds. And the price and the rate of bonds work inversely. So there's a lot of people buying bonds. There's probably a lot of people that will continue to rush to buy bonds, which again raises the price, and then interest rates and yields continue to fall. The 10-year Treasury is a marker that we often use for comparison purposes. The lowest that it got in 2008 was 1.3%, I believe, and it closed yesterday or the day before. 10-year Treasuries closed at 0.54, the lowest ever in the history of them keeping track of that. So the questions before you as you consider this refunding opportunity, and questions that we all wish we knew the answer to, which is what are rates going to be 6 months from now? The reason that question is important to you is because about 6 months from now, somewhere around September or October, you can refund these as tax exempt bonds as a what we would call a current refunding. So based upon the call date of February 1st, 2021, you're allowed to refund bonds anytime within 90 days of the call date as a current, what we call a current refunding. So in or about September, late September, October, to close within 90 days of February 1st, 2021, you could issue these not as taxable advance refunding, but as a tax exempt current refunding. So, two takeaways from my last 2 minutes. One is that what we show here today as savings of $378,000, we even had some cushion built into that rate. That number is probably a bit higher. I don't know how much higher. I wouldn't use the word significantly or considerably. It's higher. It's higher. Your savings are better. If we believe that the market is going to remain stagnant or stay the same or be generally the same, there's no doubt that the answer would be let's wait and issue tax exempt bonds when they're callable. If you think rates are going to stay about the same, if the world that we're living in with all of the pieces that move the market, the last presentation, if those are going to impact us to a point where rates are not going to significantly increase, then we should still see savings on a tax exempt analysis, 6 months from now. So that is what is here before you today. Again, I mean, we look at all of your debt all of the time to look for these types of opportunities and want to get in front of you and present them. And I know sometimes they raise more questions than they answer. And I'm always asked questions that I can't answer in the midst of this. Remember that over the last 10 years, since 2008, almost all of us municipal advisors and folks a lot wiser and smarter than us have been talking about a rising interest rate environment for the last 10 years, and it really never came to fruition. And now we're back, in a super low interest rate environment. So being able to tell the future is difficult. So we have to consider what we know today as you ponder the question. And I'm happy to step back now and take questions.
So let me ask you about the future.
Of course.
So let's say we did nothing today and the market did stay the same, and we're now in September, October. Is there any sense of what the additional savings to the county would be if the market were the same as September, October, and we did tax exempt?
So there really isn't. I don't have that analysis in front of us because every day there have been so many monumental changes in this market that it's impossible to rerun every one of these every day. But I think it's safe. Well, it certainly would be safe to say that if the market stays as it is and we do a tax exempt refunding analysis 6 months from now, that would be better. Tax exempt rates are always under taxable rates, but all of that is so compressed now. They're almost on top of one another. So, which is why you see a taxable refunding that produces savings over a tax exempt rate many years ago. So yeah, there would be savings if we could do this tax exempt. If we ran this tax exempt today, it would be better than taxable.
And you understand what I'm trying to figure out is secure this today, this amount today, or if it's a 5% increase, I don't want to risk it. If it's a 50% increase, maybe that changes the decision making.
And I'll just add to your comments, Commissioner Morrow. The soonest that we could sell these bonds would be April 28th, right, Paul?
Right, 4 week, about 6 weeks out, yep.
Right,
beat
so
sale. Yep.
who knows what's gonna
Yeah.
happen in 6 weeks. One other factor to consider for this fall is we have a presidential election, which tends to impact rates and markets historically as well. Again, it's a crystal ball, but those are a couple factors. We can't sell today is essentially the issue.
So, sir, if I did my math right, you said 0.54 on the 10-year treasuries?
Correct.
So if somebody has 100,000 in savings and they wanna live off the interest, that'd be a whopping $540 on that 100,000, am I correct?
Invested over 10 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the
Annually.
10-year treasury, yep, yep.
Okay.
Yep.
The other question, I don't know if you wanna say this and over this, Ryan, but what are our reserves approximately?
Anywhere from 20 to 22 million is what we carry for
So
reserves.
we have probably two really big bills coming up in the next year and a half or two.
Well, we have some capital improvements that we're planning to use reserves for.
Plus the interchange by Portland possibly also.
That'll be probably another
3.5.
bond debt issue, actually.
Oh,
That would be
Potentially.
actually- Potentially, if we decide that, right?
Any questions for the gentleman?
Well, we're still looking at crystal balls, just how much risk do we wanna take going out? Do we wanna look at going out 6 weeks or 6 months? Or, I mean, that's really the take here. Everything is pretty volatile.
We would be paying double interest on that for until what, next February 1st?
Correct, yep, correct, and that's an excellent
That's built
point,
into
Mr.
this
Chair.
number.
Okay.
That-
So, based on what we ultimately sell for.
And then
I
if
mean,
we put
that's the
that
other
money
variable.
on a shelf for 8 months, what interest rate are we looking at? Like,
So that's an excellent question, Mr. Chair. What you're referring to is called negative arbitrage. I know some of you are accountants up there. I know
Only
Commissioner
one.
did. Okay. So it's not a fun it's like sausage making, so we don't want to talk too much about negative arbitrage. But you hit the nail on the head. There is a cost to in putting that money in escrow today while you're earning very little on it, much less than we assumed on March 2nd, which is going to be a drag on the refunding compared to the interest that you're paying on the bonds to the call date. So that negative arbitrage number, when we ran this on March 2nd, it isn't that bad. It's $95,000. So to put that in perspective, that means that if everything stayed exactly the same, all of that $95,000 of negative drag on this refunding would move over and become savings on top of what you see here if everything remained exactly the same and we got to the call date. So, and that number, that number is higher because yields on investments that we assumed on March 2nd are completely different than they were today as well. So,
If we were to go forward and then 48 hours before we decide, oh geez, the market has changed dramatically again, can we stop?
so yes. In fact, Commissioner, if I was here to present the results and they showed savings of, let's say, 200,000, and you just said, well, that doesn't meet our expectation. It's slower than we wanted it to be. You could elect to not award the bids. So many years ago, before the SEC controlled us and started calling us municipal advisors and gave us a fiduciary responsibility to you folks and everything, many years ago we would just call that even up, and we worked in anticipation of a deal and no harm, no foul. Today, because we cannot work dependent upon a closing anymore, there would be costs to you today in doing that. So, most of our costs. Most of your costs would be already, by the time I got to here to show you the bids, they would all be in there. Your legal fees, your rating fee, our fee, they would all be there. 90% of them. So
It typically, Paul, what you do is, for a Tuesday board meeting, you sell or request bids the Monday, the day before.
correct. Yep,
And bring those.
that's correct. Yep.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
How many other counties, municipalities, whatever, are taking advantage of this at this point? I assume you're busy?
Super busy, Commissioner. Yes, the market creates a lot of opportunity, a lot of activity for us. So, yes, and so there are a lot of opportunities out there to refund or refinance. And I guess as far as other people taking advantage of it, you folks are sort of really on the early cusp of this wave, being here to discuss this. So I don't know if that helps or not, but
Curious.
some will, some won't, some will decide to wait, some will take advantage of opportunities. Now it really is dependent upon, the situation.
Okay, it's 1% of our revenue, if it's down to that number. And that's kind of how I do my math on that. That's a percentage point of our normal levy in savings, if you look at that.
Almost 2%.
Yeah. Well, I'm being generous on that
Yeah.
side, so.
Well, that's part of our job.
Well,
It is where it's-
and then granted, we're all asked to be gazing into the same crystal ball.
Well, they can't hardly go down 1%.
That's why I'm inclined to support the process here.
There are some countries where there are negative interest rates, right?
That hasn't happened here yet, but there's some expectation that we may go there this time. Discussion of it, but
There was a country or two, was it Japan or somewhere?
Japan has been under negative.
It could
for a
be.
while.
That's what I get on my savings at the bank,
Right?
Yeah.
You're gonna pay them extra,
just to be there, right?
just to be there.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
So, Paul, we had a 50-point basis cut by the Fed last week. Projections are there'll probably be another this month. That trickles down to impact rates on bonds, right? Typically.
Yep. Yes, Mr. Croce. So it's likely that it's going to go to zero. That's the discussion. We're at 50 basis points today. It's likely that the bank interfund rate that you referred to is going to go to zero. And that's to stimulate the economy and, help move us in the direction away from refunding bonds and, back into the stock market. And so, yeah, that's likely to happen. That's likely to happen. And given what's happening in the stock market and business earnings and et cetera, and future predictions of all that, it's there to stimulate that side of the Wall Street economy.
Well, I kind of like Terry's idea about going, was your idea to go?
Well, that's what I was gonna ask Ryan.
Go
if I
ahead
might
and
share.
cancel out?
Do you need action from us at this point?
We don't need a formal motion, just direction for myself and Heather and Paul to yes, go ahead and pursue this for a possible sale date on April 28th, or wait till the call. If it was my personal money and this opportunity came about, I would move forward personally. That's kind of how you have to think about this. Is
I
what
think
would you do
that's the
personally?
general-
I think that's
General consensus?
Yeah.
No objections?
agreed.
Agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you. We'll see you back here in 2 weeks then.
It's good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for your time.
Thanks, Paul.
Ryan, you have another subject?
Yes. Let me get to my information on that. Okay, so the South Central multi-county HRA has informed us that they have an opportunity to possibly sell some of the mobile home units that they have in Sibley County. I'm going to provide here, as I did in the packet, just a little history on the HRA because we don't typically have a lot of contact with them. In this particular development that occurred 20-some years ago has a long history to it. So, so we're in a multi-county HRA with Martin, Sibley, Waseca, and Watonwan County. In 1993, the HRA issued $20.3 million of bonds to build housing units in each county, known since then as the Amberfield development. By 1995, there was an operating deficit with this development, and in 2000, the primary bondholders sued the HRA. A settlement agreement was then approved by all parties, and it included the counties levying dollars to make the interest payments on the remaining debt until 2024. After 2024, the bondholders will likely foreclose to pay the principal of the debt, is what we're assuming today, because there's a lot of principal remaining. At that point, there will be no obligation left for each county to levy dollars. The HRA would technically still have some obligation to this debt, but the HRA not having any liquid funds to work with would be of no value to those investors and bondholders. So the likelihood of a foreclosure of these facilities is very likely. So currently, the HRA received unsolicited interest for the purchase of the Gaylord Mobile Home Park. Under the settlement agreement that we signed back in 2000 with the bondholders, each county, the HRA, and the trustee for the bondholders must approve the sale of any units. All proceeds of the sale would go to pay closing costs, and then any remaining funds would go to the bondholders. The county's annual levy under the settlement agreement is currently $120,786 and typically increases 2% a year. The sale of the mobile home park would have little impact on each county's levy. It's a very complicated formula that they have in place for determining how much levy comes from each county. Sibley County pays the most because they've got far and away the most units. I believe there's 30-some mobile home pads or units in this park, but the total units factored in to our formula is only 3. How they came up with that, I'm not sure, but so in essence, if this were sold, you're only removing 3 units out of the total 295 that exists with the formula. Rough estimate, I estimate it to be about $1,000 increase in our levy should these units be sold. So what the HRA is requesting is that per the settlement agreement that was signed in 2020, or excuse me, 2000, that each county moving forward with the possible sale. The sale is not in any way, shape, or form done yet. This just allows the HRA to move forward with those discussions.
That is exactly the content of our discussions at HRA. I'm the representative there. And again, this is not the final sale. This is merely the move to step forward. Our requirements were such that all the members had to authorize even the attempt at looking at the value. We haven't even done an appraisal as of yet. And those things were in place once everyone agreed to this. And it's agreed to explore the request. And that's really all we're looking for. If there were a sale to happen, it would again come back before each of the respective boards to do that. That being said, I'd make that motion.
Second.
Any other discussion?
I would just add that the whole Amberfield development has a very long history, as Commissioner Kolars has been here for many of those years, but it's probably in the best interest of the HRA if these units can be sold.
Yes.
Rather than having to go through a lengthy foreclosure process possibly someday.
Have the other counties acted on this yet, or is this coming to all of us kind of at the same
It's all
time?
about the same
About
time,
the same time.
based on availability of boards. Yeah.
I would anticipate all the other counties approving this, is
Right.
the sense I got from
Yes,
the HRA.
and that was the consensus when I met with the committee the last time.
Well, we have a motion and a second. Any other questions, discussion? All in favor, say
It's a resolution.
this resolution.
It's a resolution, call it.
Kemp,
Yes.
Morrow,
Yes.
Yes.
Germa,
Yes.
Kohler.
Yes.
Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you.
So, Nate, are you up?
Yep.
Good morning. Included in your packets, you should have a copy of the annual Ag Inspector Report for 2019 and work plan summary for 2020. I'll just kind of go through a couple of topics or numbers and let you guys kind of browse it and ask any questions if you have any to see fit. So the work plan summary for 2020 is kind of it's a basis off what we've done in the past, so it's all kind of referencing hours spent in 1918, and that's what I put forward into this, estimating that's what the time will be spent for 2020 doing this. So you'll see that on your first page, a grand total of approximately 274 hours is what's anticipated to be spent. The report for 2019 is on the following page. It kind of goes through ag inspector training, noxious weed inspection, pesticide tests, seed sampling, follow-up violations. Kind of tells you what I've been doing and what I've spent. It's hard to put a number on the estimated time spent doing ag inspection duties versus regular drainage inspection duties, because if I'm driving down the road, I'm always looking for stuff or doing stuff, so it's hard to say, well, I'm just going to go out and look for weeds today when I'm going on some other call or doing some other task. So that, you'll see that in the percentages there. Last year, as far as noxious weed violations or complaints or real issues, there wasn't too many. Most people are pretty decent to work with, and if you follow up with them or ask them or talk to them to take care of a issue, they usually do that. So we had no real reason to get the county attorney's office involved last year or write any nasty letters, so that's good. And on the following page, the very last page, you'll see what the highway department has spent on spraying, mowing, and kind of totals for noxious weed mitigation and prevention. And I'll answer any questions on this report. Otherwise, I have a couple other bits of information I could add that are new this year or different.
Well, Nate, thank you for all your work. Have you had much, a lot of the complaints I get are, in the road ditch.
Yeah.
And a lot of times it's not even our road ditch, it's the DOT or DNR. So have you had a lot of communications with those two agencies, or?
I do talk. There's been some new kind of turnover at the DOT, whether it be the LeSueur office or out of the New Ulm office. So there's some new kind of supervisors and managers there who I've been working with, and they've been pretty responsive and open to the idea that we got to do some more and be a little more aggressive here. So last year they started doing that, and of course last year it was a really wet year and they have limited resources. So if the road is flooding, they're going to go take care of a frozen culvert or patching something, or rather than mowing weeds. So they're spread thin, but when they are able to, they seem to respond when I make contact or ask them to do something.
Seems the biggest thing is that the thistles are blooming.
Yeah, they're blooming and blowing by the time they get there to mow them.
Yes. Right.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear it.
Mr. Chair, I believe, Nate, you just applied for and got a grant again for...
Yep, that was on my other notes here, so I can talk about that too. But a few of the commissioners, and I think Ryan had sent a link to the highway department about a grant the MDA was offering for townships could apply, counties could apply for any type of. There's two different forms for noxious weed eradication, and then there was also another one to where, I'm stalling here to think what the other one was, but we had applied for the grant. It was a level 1 grant, and you could apply up to $10,000, and of course that's what we applied for. And the highway maintenance manager and myself put together the proposal and laid out kind of how much money and effort we spend in the past to what we'll do with the money if we do receive it. And I think it's really good that we have such a good way of tracking what we do and how we do it and how much we spend, that they really took that into consideration, because we requested the maximum of $10,000 and that's what we received. So we'll be getting that, and we're kind of working through the process and figuring out what would be the best way to use those funds to purchase equipment or extra herbicide, or you can use it for man hours or anything. So that's good news. And then also this past winter there was a discovery of oriental bittersweet growing in our county, and that was in Lake Prairie Township on some private property that an individual had contacted the MDA, and we had worked with them on setting up kind of a plan or a proposal to take care of this. And we're lucky that the MDA has grant funding available to do this type of eradication, because this is a new species in Nicollet County, so it's important you kind of take action right away before it spreads. And we kind of set up a plan and a proposal with this landowner to where the MDA had contractors that were available to do this, and they came in and eradicated this. It's a vine that grows up in trees, and they eradicated this invasive species. And subsequently to that, a mailing went out to all other landowners kind of in the area saying this is what's going on and this is what we're looking for. And we've had a few people call to report what they think are the target species here, but they turned out to be the native kind. So so far it looks promising, like it was resolved there. So other than that, there's nothing too new that I'm aware of in our county. The Palmer amaranth is kind of seems like it was taken care of, and now the counties that initially had it, like Redwood I know had a case, and there's a few other ones there, they've been eradicated, and now there's currently only 2 counties with it actively growing, and that's Houston and Lincoln County.
Questions for Nate?
Just one other question, somewhat related. Emerald ash borer. So I've gotten a couple questions about what is the county doing with that, but we really don't have a program or anything related to that. I know that University Extension provides education and information to residents, but as ag inspector, weed inspector, that doesn't fall under your purview, does it?
Well, it's not a program that I'm part of right now, but the MDA does have they have volunteers as well as individual seasonal part-time workers that go around and scout and try to look for this. So same with gypsy moth. I know a few years ago I took part in that, where you place traps throughout the county and survey that way. They've kind of hired more seasonal workers to do that, so they're actively working on it. As far as myself, I'm not part of that right now. And they're also, I got a notice from the University of Minnesota, they're doing a research project on buckthorn eradication and kind of trying to come up with some new ideas on how to control it. And there's, I think, 120 sites in southern Minnesota they picked, and one of them is in Nicollet County. So, of course, they need what you call a permit to transport the seeds, because they're going to be removing it from one area and then doing like a 5x5 test plot, planting it here, and then putting native species in there to try and outcompete it. So I'm working with the University of Minnesota right now on kind of figuring out where they're going to be doing this and navigating that process. So it's good to see there's some effort being put into that.
And that is all over, I think, isn't it?
It's really widespread. And a lot of people don't know, but aphids actually winter in buckthorn. So as far as a soybean farmer, it'd be good to kind of try to eradicate it around your property.
Anything else? We don't need any motion or anything? Okay, thank you, Nate.
Thank you,
Thanks
Nate.
for all your good work.
Thank you.
Michelle, you'd like to have a few words with us?
If I could, may I just remain here, or do you want me to sit in the center?
I don't care, whatever works best for you.
Thank you. As you know, in the past, Chris Wursel has come before the board and asked that March be designated Women's History Month in Nicollet County, and she's not able to join us this year, and so I am bringing forth before the board a request that the board proclaim March as Women's History Month. I'm also bringing forth a request that the county fund a table at the Women Celebrating Women event. I have the form here for Ryan that I'll submit following the meeting if the board approves it. But I am asking for that proclamation, and I think Chris traditionally has read it, and so I can read it if you are so inclined, Mr. Chair.
Please skip the reading, or?
Let her read it.
Okay.
Proclamation. Whereas during Women's History Month, we celebrate the many accomplishments of women in Nicollet County, and whereas the theme for the 2020 Women's History Month celebration is Valiant Women of the Vote, and whereas the March 20th, 2020 Women Celebrating Women event will recognize a local woman who has proven to be a leader and an inspiration to others in the St. Peter community. Now therefore be it resolved that the month of March be designated to celebrate the accomplishments of all women. Be it further resolved that the Nicollet County Board of Commissioners proclaim March 2020 as Women's History Month in Nicollet County, signed prospectively by the chair.
Make the motion for the proclamation.
Is there a second?
I will add, Mr. Chair, we have two winners here at the table.
I was gonna say
of
we
the
have
past award, the county
alums.
attorney and Commissioner Drannell, so.
And
Now, are women from the whole county eligible, or just the St. Peter community?
St. Peter community are eligible. So the nominations are open, so if there is a woman that you would like to nominate, the nominations are available online. It is the celebration of women's right to vote, so there will also be, the League of Women Voters will be in attendance at the event as well.
Discussion? So we have a second, and we gotta do a call vote.
Kemp?
Yes.
Val?
Yes.
Morrow?
Yes.
Yes.
Kohler?
Yes.
And then to sponsor the table, do we need a second motion?
Is it a-
Sure, if you'd like.
I don't know.
I'll move it.
Second.
Any discussion? This we can say aye, right?
Yes.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, passes.
And it's to sponsor the table. The individuals sitting at the table still pay for their own meals, but it's to sponsor the table itself.
Right.
Okay.
I think we've done that in the past. if I
Correct.
recall,
Yeah, we
so,
have.
yeah.
Yep. So thank you.
Thank you
Okay.
for your work.
Informational items. I guess it's up to me then now. Let's see, since we were last here, I went to the Capitol and visited with no less than 14 legislators, all except the last two who I knew before and the last two I met. And also with Shane from Highway 14, and that's when all the rumors were starting about the governor's announcement in Nicollet kind of seeping out. And of course, I went there to Nicollet, Highway 14, went to the Soil and Water meeting the other day, got some criticism of our support for the snow blower acquisition because it hasn't snowed that much, which really seems kind of erratic. Was busy with the farm show in New Ulm. I'm one of the lieutenants there, and we had a nice seminar, not seminar, but whatever it would be, open meeting that Nick Frentz moderated, and the Secretary of Agriculture and the Commissioner of Agriculture and the Commissioner of the DNR were there, and it was a lot of discussion. Went to the Extension Committee last night, Terry's first time there, I believe. And one of the things that kind of not puzzled me, but they have a gentleman in Mankato that's working mostly with Latin banking, and non-Latin too. But then the gentleman, Mr. Taylor, that's from the Extension, he showed about they have these sheets for people that want to open restaurants to help them through. And I says, well, do you have that available in other languages? And he didn't think so. So that would be something they should do, because if English isn't your first language, I'm sure it's even more difficult getting through the system. And I plan on sitting through the Cortland Township meeting this afternoon and the Nicollet Township meeting tonight. That's my report. So, Denny?
Well, since I last was with you, I did a couple of teleconferences with Brown Nicollet Community Health, along with the Emergency Communications Board, Finance Board, which I'm serving on. And I also joined most of you at Nicollet, for those of us that were there. Just to speak briefly on that, I am heartened by the efforts of some of our long-term members here on this board who have diligently worked and constantly worked on the issues of the Highway 14 expansion. It appears that the legislature has pushed through their component as far as making ourselves eligible for the grant or the loan from the Fed. We had very, very strong promises from all of the powers that be that this is going to be done, and I again thank you for your perseverance and your efforts in making that happen. I think we've all done our part, but some of you have been dragging that part for a very long time, so again I appreciate that, and I'm sure our citizens appreciate that, and I'm hopeful that we will be able to turn a shovel soon, and that will be a significant victory for our commuters and most of our citizens that are driving to and fro. So again, thank all of you for very much for that, and again thank our staff for working on the coronavirus issues and keeping us in the loop, doing their very best to keep everybody in the region informed. And I think that's all I have. I think I've done all my other pieces, but again, thank you all for your efforts and for your support.
Thank you. Terry?
I too was at day at the Capitol for AMC and participated in some other meetings on Highway 14, including last Friday. Went to the extension meeting. Thank you, John. That was good to start. It was good to hear from the folks from the 4-H program, and all their plans and activities sound exciting. Jack and I did the presidential primary canvass last Thursday, I think. Last Thursday. I think that's what I've got for right now.
A lot of people voted for people that dropped out before
Yes.
elections.
Yes.
Lori?
That was our
I had nothing in the last 2 weeks.
Really? Oh,
or no, you had a meeting
Busy lady.
since that conference. We were at
Conference.
Brown
I
Nicollet.
was at the Brown Nicollet, and was that since then?
I don't think so.
I don't remember whether you reported that or not, because I wasn't here for the
We
meeting.
did the video teleconference.
Right,
with the
that was our
Brown
first whack
Yeah.
at that,
Was
yes.
that, I thought that was before our last board meeting.
It very well may be, yes. No,
Jack?
it wasn't.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Like most of us, we were at the AMC Legislative Conference and had an opportunity to visit with legislators there. Also attended the governor's meeting. Thank you, Commissioner Kemp, for the words that, I think we all have earned some measure of our voices being heard by the state, and hopefully, and to see an even amount of Republicans and
Yeah.
Democrats standing behind Governor Walz was amazing. And then, of course, the fire happened, so we had to disperse for a while. That was pretty interesting.
In the first sentence, I think.
It was pretty close right off the top. Although Walz, to his credit, he's always on time.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, and you ask him one question and he can talk for 15 minutes, as I always mentioned when we had him on the radio. But Commissioner Morrow and I canvassed the votes, and St. Peter had a 33% voter turnout,
Yeah.
and North Mankato had a 24%. So those numbers are encouraging. I'm planning to attend the GMG annual meeting tonight in Mankato.
Can I just ask you a question, Jack? Were there any Republican votes, or were they all Democratic
Where?
for the primary?
Well, I mean, it was 5-1 Democratic
Okay.
presidential to the other person.
Okay, that's the answer I was asking for, other person.
I mean, and if that holds true in the general election, glory be to God.
Ryan? So do we need motions on the meetings, conferences?
That's all set up.
That's
The
done.
next event is the leadership conference at first week of April.
This one?
In this one.
Okay. So, we need a motion to adjourn, or?
No, you got a per diems and expenses.
Oh, okay.
I'd move it.
Second.
I'll second it. Or did you
Any
get a
discussion?
second?
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Passes.
Move to adjourn.
Mr., could I just
Oh, sure.
remind the board we are doing the food drive for countywide, so that challenge is on. So if anyone would like to make a donation for the food drive, we'll also have I think we're going to have another grocery cart to display out here. We just have to get it accomplished. So that'll be available for the board to participate in if it would like to see who's going to hold the Campbell's Soup Trophy. So, and then, yes, that's my updates. Thank you.
Anything
Move to
else?
adjourn.
Do we have a second on that?
Second.
Discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Adjourned. We have to call the drainage meeting to order. The consent agenda.
Move the consent agenda.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any public appearances? Appears not. Motion to adjourn.
Move it.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
We are